Okay, so our next speaker is Bryan McLachlan. So this is for my bankers and insurers in the house. It's going to be very topical for you. So this topic is Beyond the AI Hype, Driving Value in Financial Services. So here's Bryan's background. He's got 30 years of experience driving change, innovation, and growth in banking, insurance, and retail. He is now the Executive Vice President for EMEA for CyborgIntell, which is the first company in the world, listen to this, to automate from data to decision with zero code for financial services. So his primary focus is to help insurers, banks, and lenders to take advantage of AI and machine learning within a trusted governance and risk management framework. Let's give a big round of applause to Bryan McLachlan, Beyond the AI Hype, Driving Value in Financial Services. Welcome, Bryan.
Thanks. So I thought I'd speak on this topic. I was asked quite an interesting question about 3 years ago. I was trying to sell our platform to a company, and I gave my whole sales pitch, and he asked me a very interesting question. He said, what is the biggest objection you've got to deal with when you're selling this platform? And my answer then was quite simple. It was, most people think it's too good to be true. You know, life can't be this simple. And that was, before COVID, the biggest objection that I faced. I had lunch with him a few weeks ago, and he asked me the same question. He said, has anything changed? What is the biggest objection you face? And undoubtedly, the answer now is the hype around AI. You know, AI progressed immensely over COVID. We had a lot of very clever people sitting in dark rooms advancing AI dramatically. And there's so much hype around AI now that it's hiding the kind of opportunities available for customers because of all the noise around AI. So I thought that would be my topic today. And I'll chat a little bit about that. But to give you an example of this, I was called by somebody who's quite senior in the technology division of one of the big banks in South Africa, and he said to me, Bryan, my boss says I need an AI. So I said, great, I'm sure we can help. What for? And he didn't have an answer. He said, well, can't you give me some ideas to take back to my boss? And it just kind of highlights for me, you know, surely you've got a problem, you need to solve it. You don't want to solve something if you don't know you've got a problem for it. So, of course, we gave him some use cases, and he got all excited, and we still haven't sold to them because now the technologists have got involved and the data scientists, and, of course, they're asking the right question, what is the actual problem you're trying to solve? So it just highlights this kind of hype. We all use AI every day, every time we use Netflix or Waze or Uber. It's around us all the time, but the hype currently is hiding some of the opportunities. I'm not going to tell you a lot about CyborgIntell. We are head officed in India. We've got offices in Johannesburg and San Francisco, and we believe we're the first company, we haven't been challenged for years on this, to automate from data to decision. We automate the entire machine learning process with zero code. But anyone wants this presentation, I'm quite happy that Zenzela sends it out. So I'm going to start with a cartoon that I saw on LinkedIn recently. This is a techie cartoon. Most people don't find it that funny. But basically the idea is, you know, what CEOs or what companies think AI is. Well, you have data, you use AI, and then you get value. But in reality, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes behind there. And partly that's true. So if you look at the bottom part, what this actually is, yeah, that's what we do. We've got a platform that does this from end to end. We've got those 5 modules. So we've got a data preparation module, which means you can bring data in from all over the organization into one set of rows and columns. We then have a model building capability where you can use that data, build millions and millions of machine learning models and select the best one. Everything's very transparent, very explainable in plain English. Everything's auto-documented. Any machine learning, whether it's built on our platform or not, we can typically deploy in about 5 minutes. And I'll touch a little bit on that just now. We have a decision engine that can combine human intelligence with artificial intelligence to get the best result. And then we've got a full model risk management tool that enables us to track and monitor all machine learning and AI models that are in the business and live to make sure that they're doing what they're meant to do. So partly that's true. Partly all of that is required to build a solution in financial services. And if you go to the next level of detail, and I promise I'm not going to take you through the slide, I asked our architect for a simple slide on on the architecture of our AI as a service, and this is what I got. And I can promise you behind every single box there's another 3 or 4 slides that looks like this. So it can be quite complicated. But in reality, it's not complicated. It's very simple. You have data, you feed it into a model, you get an answer real time, and that answer adds value to the business. And the analogy I want to use, all of us probably used Waze or Uber or something similar to come here today. What did you do? You configured the venue, you pushed go, and you got here, and you used that technology. But the technology behind that is vast. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. You're talking space technologies. You're talking getting satellites into space. You're talking geocoding down to 5 meters around where you are at the speed you're moving at 60 kilometers an hour. Whether it's cloudy or whether there's a solar storm, it all still works. Even when you get to Earth, you're talking to beacons all over the place. If you think of the technology behind it, I mean, just to get a satellite into space, you've got to be an expert. Any one little part of that, you've got to be an expert. And of course, all that needs to exist, but actually, it's very simple. Plug in Hilton Hotel, you get you. And I think AI has become a lot like that. So almost this technology now is taking you back to, I just want to go back to the cartoon. In our world now, literally, you give us data, we'll give you the answer. And it's that simple. So the old-fashioned process of building machine learning models, taking 3 to 6 months to do that, to deploy it, we condense that into typically about 2 weeks. And 2 weeks includes all the testing, etc. And we're able to offer value to our customers within that time because we've automated that entire process. Zero code required to do that, even in our environment. So I see some skeptical smiles. People don't believe me. But welcome to challenge us on that. Well, what's the advantage of this? Essentially, there's 3 advantages. The first is time to value. If something's going to take you 3 to 6 months to do, then you can lose a lot of money in 3 to 6 months, or there's a big opportunity cost to 3 to 6 months. If you can do the same project in 2 weeks and deliver the same value or more value in 2 weeks, there's a lot of value to that. It takes us, once the data preparation's done, which we've also largely automated through our feature store and our open data accelerators. After that, typically we live with almost any use case in 2 to 4 weeks. If it's a simple predictive model, 2 weeks. If it's something very complex using large language models and automating stuff, it might take a little bit longer, 4 or 5 weeks. Our record is a customer gave us the go-ahead on a Thursday night. We got access to the data on Friday morning. We were live in production, and this is a large listed company in South Africa. We were live in their production systems on Monday morning. They had a return on investment from what they spent with us by Thursday again. So that's our record. We don't do that every time. But typically, I'm trying to illustrate very, very quick return on investment from machine learning. Also, all machine learning models will fail over time. They'll fail for different reasons. Statistically, they'll fail, or they will fail because customer behavior changes. Processes change in the organization, all of these things, and a lot of other reasons. Models start to overfit, they start to self-fulfill. So all of these things lead to model failure. When the model fails, depending on the model, it can be very expensive. So if you've got a fraud model that's failing because fraudsters have changed their modus operandi, and it takes you 3 to 6 months to retrain your fraud model and redeploy it, you can lose a lot of money. If you can retrain and redeploy that model in a few hours, you're going to lose a lot less, as an example. the acceleration, the rapid acceleration means that once that data preparation is done, you can now start implementing new use cases very, very quickly, addressing new problems very quickly. You can really accelerate. So typically with our customers, they'd start with 1 or 2 use cases. Very often we end up running 20 or more use cases for them, because once they see the value and they understand how it works and they get confidence in it, then you can rapidly accelerate dealing with other problems. And then your productivity. So we're about 250 times quicker than a human data scientist building these models. When we build models, we use 14 different algorithms or techniques, statistical techniques. We build at least 10,000 models per technique. It's millions of models. In South Africa, that's never taken more than about 2 hours. So within 2 hours, we're doing all of that work. That means nothing changes really in 2 hours. Russia doesn't invade Ukraine, interest rates don't go up, fuel price doesn't go up. Things that can affect customer behavior doesn't change in 2 hours. But if you take in 3 to 6 months to do that, a lot can change. In addition, it takes out human error. There's no human error, because if you assume that everything's working correctly now, then there's no human involvement. It just happens. There's no human error. So typically, we reduce about 90% of a data scientist tasks in building machine learning models and deploying them. And we typically improve accuracy of any model by anything from 2% to 15%. 2% doesn't sound like a lot. That particular example was a life insurance company. 2% improvement in their underwriting was massive for them. It was worth quite a few million. Because it's low volume, high value business. Yeah. Typical use cases, and I'm not going to go into these, we've got about 130 live. So in banking, it's anything from customer acquisition, credit scorecards, driving cross-sell, upsell, customer retention, collection. At the moment, we're doing a huge amount of debt collection work, application fraud, transaction fraud. If you can think of a business problem, and excuse me, that's my fault. That's my wife saying good luck for the presentation. Apologies. I'm actually blushing. So yeah, if you can think of the problem and there's data available, and in banks and insurers there's typically data available, we can ingest data from anywhere, be it the call center system, be it your CRM, be it your claim system, be it your transaction system. We can ingest third-party data, TransUnion data, et cetera, et cetera. And the more data you have, the more columns of data you can create from that data, the more likely you are to pick up hidden patterns and behaviors. So if you can think of the problem anywhere through a banking value chain, we could probably help. The same in insurance. Again, we do a lot of work on marketing analytics. At the moment, we're doing a lot of claims work, claims automation, and claims fraud, waste, and abuse. So fraud is the claim's not valid. Waste is the claim is valid, but the customer's embellished the claim. So they had their car stolen, but it just so happened that their gym bag was in the boot with their 5,000 Rand running shoes and their smartwatch, et cetera, and it just so happens that adds up to the excess. We found one insurer in South Africa where around 30% of their claims are embellished. So if you think of the cost of that to that company, but even to the industry and to the consumer, it's immense. And then abuse is when the supplier games a system to maximize what they get paid for their work. So if you think of a panel beater or a doctor or any kind of supplier, very often, if you go to the doctor for an operation, they'll ask you, are you on medical aid? Which plan are you on? Which company is it with? And very often the reason for those questions is they want to work out what they can charge you and get the money back paid by the medical aid. So we're doing a lot of that kind of abuse work at the moment, but anywhere through the value chain. One I've spoken to quite a few people here this week about is on the marketing side, where you're selling risk products like insurance or credit. We're doing a lot of work with marketing. I'm always fascinated by credit companies that spend a fortune on leads, and they send these leads out to customers. They spend a fortune on that. They spend a fortune on then processing those applications when they come in. and then they decline 90% of them. It's just bizarre. Why even market to customers if you're not going to get them through your credit process? So typically in credit products, we save acquisition costs of anything north of 40% because we enable them to target customers that are more likely to be approved, and then even more importantly, if they're approved, to actually take up the loan. Very often your better consumers are applying to multiple companies. So hopefully it gives you an idea of the kind of use cases. Some of the results that we've had, and I don't want to dwell on this too much, but we've got credit risk approval rates where we increased the approval rate by 28% without taking on any additional risk. The 40% customer acquisition cost I've just explained now. Marketing campaigns, we've improved certain campaigns by well over 200%. In fact, the example I used right in the beginning of that company, that was this campaign here. So by Thursday, they doubled their return from their marketing spend. And then collections, typically we improve collections or help companies improve their collections by 20% or above. The highest we've improved is 50%, but typically in that ballpark. So in this environment where companies are really struggling to collect debts from their customers, that can add up to a really big return on investment. And then finally, some slightly different ones. The insurance that I mentioned, where we very often in insurance, the early claims is very interesting. People only buy the insurance because they're expecting to claim. That can drive up costs. It's not really fraud unless they're dishonest in the application, but it really drives up the cost for the insurer. If you can strip that out, in life insurance, if you can strip out one person, that will pay for the entire investment that a company would make with us. And then the sales, medical fraud, etc., that we've detected. So I just want to go right back to the original slide, and that really is the cartoon, which is, yes, data science actually is managing the data, wrangling the data, pulling it together, putting it into one format, creating new features from that data. So a banker statement, for instance, we would create 1,000 new columns of data off one bank statement. So if money is coming in or out the account, is the money coming in quicker? Is it coming in slower? Is it accelerating, decelerating? Is it large transactions, small transactions? Is value going up, value going down? That's 8 or 10 new columns of data I've just described to you, and you can create thousands of different statistical methods to create thousands of columns. The more columns of data you have in machine learning, the more likely you are to pick up hidden patterns and behaviors. Yes, you need to do modeling. Modeling these days is very simple. There's a lot of technologies out there that enable you to model quickly. We compete with them all. With our platform, you can use our feature store and then feed in that data into our competitor products, or vice versa. Everything's modularized. The same thing with deployment engines. There are a lot of deployment engines out there. You can build your model yourself or with a competitor product. We can help you deploy that with some basic configuration. And then finally, the model risk management piece, all that bit at the bottom. Is it legal? Is it ethical? What are some of these other problems? Is it secure? What are some of these other problems that you need in data science? Again, these days, those problems are taken care of. And then just to finish again, it really is that simple. If we have data, access to data, or by the way, you can license our platform and do this all yourselves. If you've got access to data, yes, lots of clever work happens in the background. A lot of bright people have written a lot of really interesting code. But the reality is, in most instances in financial services, you're wanting a risk score or some kind of score, the propensity for somebody to buy a product, the propensity for them to be approved, or you're trying to classify something. Is this a claim that you can put through? Is this transaction valid, or could it be money laundering? These are the kind of problems that you're trying to solve. And all of that is really, forget the hype. These days, it's actually quite simple. It's a lot simpler than it was 3 years ago. Yeah, so that's my presentation. I try to keep it very short and simple and leave some time for questions. So if there are any questions, then we can take that. Yeah, do you want a mic? Or are you loud? Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. Okay, also, today I'm still going to take it from where I'm coming from. We fund startups, and we are in the market for things like this, whereby we can at least avail this type of solutions, because one of the problems we're facing right now is the guys that side are trying to build their models, and they don't have access to the data, let alone the computing power required to do this. But if right now you're telling me that you can avail something like this in a form of an API for any of those services, how would that go about? So since I'm part of an organization that offers basically just funding to those startups, this is also something that we can say that, okay, fine, for anybody in the fintech space or any other development, we have OI and they have this solution. So are we saying that this is something that we can offer to people to say that there's a conduit here, you no longer need to say you are innovating through training models. There's guys that can do that in 2 hours' time instead of the years that you would take normally because of just the lack of infrastructure and the cost related to the training. So I guess what I'm saying is this: is there a sandbox that you can avail to these guys for them to at least start practicing around how your generative model works? And if so, what kind of partnerships would you be offering for companies like ours?
Okay, that's a good question. So I think the main purpose of my discussion is there's a lot of hype out there and a lot of vendors trying to complicate AI. And they're trying to complicate AI to make it seem like it's a, it's a really complex thing to do, which these days it's frankly not. And very often, the more they're trying to complicate it, the reason is because their solution is a little bit outdated. And everyone's got AI these days. Of course, they have. We all use it every day. In terms of, especially in Africa, one of the big advantages of doing something in a few days that used to take a few months is obviously cost. We tie up a data scientist for 4 or 5 days. It's a lot cheaper than tying up a data scientist for 3 to 6 months. So these kind of technologies are becoming actually relatively inexpensive for companies like that. I always say if a company's got data and they've got a business problem, we can probably help them. But the one thing we do need is data. So the company, if they've got data and they've got sufficient data, which is a lot less than it was 3 years ago, but if they've got data and sufficient data or access to data, which could be via a third party, it could be, it could be a company like TransUnion who's sponsoring. It could be all sorts of other third-party data. There are a lot of suppliers of third-party data. If there's access to data, then we can probably help. Yeah. And in Africa, so large companies, large listed banks, typically they would license our platform and they would do all of this work themselves. The data scientists are fully in control of every part of those complex processes. However, we do offer AI as a service or use case as a service where we simply charge a monthly rental fee or an API fee each time we offer a score. So that tends to work for smaller companies in other parts of Africa and for smaller companies in South Africa who don't have they don't have the data science teams and the infrastructure and etc. There's a shortage of skills all over Africa. They might not have that, then AI as a service works very well. Or they can't afford to license a platform such as this. Yeah. So we do have clients in Africa, and we are opening up to clients in Africa currently. Yeah. How are we doing for time? Is there time for another question, or are we done? We're done. Great. Is there another short question from anyone? If there are questions that you don't want to bring up in this forum, please feel free. We're through here, or reach out to me on LinkedIn or email, etc. Quite happy to take them. Thanks.